Let's get some more on this story. I'm joined now by Mark Kimmit. He's a former Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs, serving under former US President George W. Bush. He joins me now from Washington, D.C. Mr. Kimmit, how have the Americans been assisting Kurdish forces in Sinjar?
Two ways. First, they have been providing a significant amount of air support, as have some of our other coalition partners. But they've also been providing assistance in the way of advisory support to the major tactical units up there with people on the ground.
And is this all now part of Obama's plan to try and really strike at the heart of ISIS?
Well, this is not striking at the heart of ISIS. That really would be a major intervention inside of Syria. What we've got going on here is cutting the supply line between Raqqa in the west and Mosul in the east. The real outcome of this battle is to try to cut that route, Route 47, so that the supplies, the logistics, the fighters can no longer either come into Mosul or leave Mosul.
And how will we judge the level of success and the level of US support in this battle?
Well, in this phase of the operation, where the intention of the U.S. Advise and Assist mission, as well as the bombing, has fundamentally been to get the Peshmerga forces to the edge of the town. As you might imagine, the air support will have to be significantly reduced as they enter in the town. From the time they get into the town, the American support is really pretty much no longer of any value. It will be tough street-to-street fighting. The Peshmerga will be fighting some very determined ISIS elements that have been dug in for quite some time. They'll be running into IEDs, landmines, snipers. And at that point, what you can do from the air is pretty limited.
Well, on that, Mr. Kimmit, just give us a sense of how difficult this is as a mission for both the Peshmerga and for the supporting US forces.
Well, street-to-street fighting is something that both forces have practiced for quite some time. We saw that in Fallujah. We saw that in a number of other towns years ago. But when you've got to go into a city and take out targets block to block, and those targets, those ISIS forces have been dug in and booby-trapped that area for months and months, it is a pretty tough fight for the Peshmerga. And as I said earlier, there's not a lot the Americans can do about it. There's not a lot the coalition can do about it, except to perhaps provide logistics support, provide ammunition and such. But the air power is neutralized. The advisory support to a great extent is neutralized as well.
And Mr. Kimmit, just give us an overview of strategically where you see the fight against Daesh, ISIS now, with Peshmerga taking on them in Sinjar and also with the US air support.
Well, my sensing is that this will be an important tactical victory when the town falls, but operationally and strategically, it will take some further operations, primarily against Ramadi, primarily against Mosul, before we see the fights along the Euphrates Valley and the Tigris Valley come to an end. I believe the key is to take Mosul and Ramadi before the Iraqis can really stand up and say we've made a significant dent into the ISIS forces. And at that point, the Iraqi security forces, along with their police and their popular mobilization forces, perhaps could start an offensive to push ISIS back towards the borders.
And Mr. Kimmit, you touched on it earlier. What do you see as being the way for the US to have a really critical strike at ISIS? Do we need more US boots on the ground?
At this point, I don't think so. And the nature of Daesh is that it stays fairly loose and fairly widespread. There is no golden bullet. There is no snake's head that can be cut off, which is where air power really comes into effect. What the air power can do and the coalition can do at this point is continue to put pressure on ISIS. But at the end of the day, it's going to take Iraqi security forces to go, as we talked about earlier, house to house, village to village, province to province, to take out the Daesh on the ground. Would more American troops help? Well, certainly they would, but at the same time, I think we've got to balance out the need for the Iraqis themselves to take on this fight because once the American and the coalition start putting large amounts of boots on the ground, it becomes a completely different fight than it has been up to this point.
Mark Kimmit, we must leave it there. Thank you very much for that insight.